My life has always followed a carefully laid plan aimed at ensuring a stable future. I put in a lot of effort, earned my degree, and secured a stable job. When I met Karen during our time at university, everything seemed to fall into place. We built a life together, had children, and settled in Albany. It was a routine existence, but I took pride in it. Yet, beneath the surface, something often felt off. The daily grind and seemingly perfect family life sometimes seemed too flawless, almost like a mask. I ignored those doubts, telling myself this was happiness, but over time, the cracks in our life became too visible to ignore. Today feels different. Like the beginning of a new chapter, there's a weight in the air, and I sense significant changes are approaching. My children, Keith and Andrea, are my world. Keith is in 3rd grade, and Andrea just started 1st grade. They are wonderful kids, but their lives are about to change in ways they don't deserve. They take after their mother more than me. I'm not especially handsome, but I'm not unattractive either. Standing 6 feet tall and weighing 165 pounds, I stay in shape by running daily and cycling professionally during the summer. At 34, with dark brown hair and a decent smile from childhood orthodontics, I'm in good health. I alternate between glasses and contacts. Karen, also 34, is a web developer, and we live in Albany, New York, a peaceful but somewhat boring city. Our life is stable, though some might find it dull. The demands of daily life, family, and work have molded me into a routine-oriented person. Fun is often reserved for weekends and summers. This morning, as I looked in the mirror before my run, I thought, what should I do? I have a problem. I decided to reach out to my friend Jordan Walters, an attorney specializing in wills, probate, and family law, and made a mental note to call him after my run. I got home around 6:30. Made coffee, showered, and dressed. Karen and the kids were waking up, so I prepared school lunches and packed a sandwich for myself. We chatted over breakfast about the day ahead, including upcoming parent-teacher conferences. Everything seemed normal. I kissed everyone goodbye except for Keith, who opted for a fist bump, his new thing. I then stepped out the door to face another day in my predictable life. The day of the parent-teacher conference coincided with a personal meeting I had arranged with Jordan. We hadn't met in a few months, so we caught up at a cafe midway between our offices. After ordering coffee and pie, I got straight to the point. Jordan, I need your advice. I've got a serious issue with Karen. Jordan looked surprised. Karen, your wife of 9 years and the mother of your 2 kids, I nodded, taking a bite of pie. Yes, that's her. It seems she's involved with someone else. I don't know how long this has been going on, but I'm unsure of what to do. I need your guidance as both a lawyer and a friend. Jordan sighed deeply and said, Mark, you're in a difficult position. Legally, divorcing Karen in New York could be tough. The law often leans toward the wife, especially regarding custody of the children, unless you can prove she's unfit. She's likely to get custody of the kids and the house. You'll also be responsible for child support until they're 21, along with spousal support and possibly the mortgage. He paused briefly, then continued, let me explain some basics of divorce law in New York. There are 7 grounds for divorce, the most common being an irreparable breakdown of the marriage for at least 6 months, often called a no-fault divorce. For this, the marriage must have lasted at least 6 months, and all financial and custody matters must be settled. Another ground is cruel and inhumane treatment, which requires evidence of severe cruelty within the last 5 years. Simple arguments aren't enough. The cruelty must be extreme enough to make living together unsafe, he added. Another ground is abandonment, where one spouse leaves for at least a year or refuses sexual relations, known as constructive abandonment. Another ground is imprisonment, applicable if a spouse has been jailed for 3 or more continuous years. Infidelity is also a reason, but it's often challenging to prove since it requires evidence from someone other than the spouses themselves. Legal separation is another path, where a couple can divorce if they live separately for a year under a valid separation agreement. Lastly, there's divorce after a separation decree, though it's rarely utilized. The court issues a separation decree, and the couple must live apart for a year before filing for divorce on this basis. As Jordan explained, the complexity and difficulty of the situation became clear to me. The legal challenges were daunting, and the emotional impact was even harder to bear. My eyes began to glaze over as Jordan continued his explanation of New York divorce laws. So, Mark, if you decide to pursue a divorce, your main options are citing irreparable breakdown or infidelity, Jordan stated in a calm and analytical tone. Proving infidelity will need strong evidence. Whether Karen admits the affair, someone else verifies it, or you uncover other proof. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy reality of the situation. Jordan continued, the irreparable breakdown of your marriage is the most commonly used ground, but think carefully before choosing. I was speechless, unsure of how to respond. Sensing my hesitation, Jordan's tone shifted. All right, that's the legal part. Now, let me speak to you as a friend. I looked at him, desperate for some reassurance that my life wasn't collapsing. Mark, you need to figure out what you truly want, he said gently. What do you mean? I want my family, my wife, my kids, and our life together, I answered, my voice filled with desperation. I get that, Jordan nodded, but you have to decide what's more important, your family or your pride. What are you saying? I asked, feeling confused. I see people all the time who go scorched earth, giving up everything just to hurt the other person, but in the end, they hurt themselves and their kids the most, Jordan explained, his words piercing through my swirling thoughts. Divorce could turn you into a part-time dad with limited time with your children. Karen will likely get custody, and you'll be on the outside looking in. I was stunned. The idea of becoming a weekend dad and losing the daily connection with my kids was unbearable. What should I do, Jordan? I asked, my voice barely audible. Jordan looked at me, a blend of sadness and realism in his expression. I have a suggestion, but it might sound unusual. Go on. What is it? I pressed, eager for any guidance. It's simple, do nothing, Jordan said, catching me off guard. What? I asked, unsure if I heard correctly. Yes, do nothing. Go home and act like you don't know anything. Keep living your life as normal. Enjoy your family, spend time with your kids, love your wife, Jordan advised. If you didn't know about Karen's affair before, and she's been a good wife and mother, maybe you can choose to overlook it for the sake of your family, but I began to object. But Jordan cut me off. He insisted. This is your decision alone. You need to balance how much you value your family against what you've discovered. If keeping your family together means more to you, then perhaps ignoring this is the best course of action. We both finished our now cold coffees, and the waitress glanced at us, signaling it was time to either order more or settle the bill and leave to free up the table. I exhaled deeply. I need to think about all this. Jordan stood up, and I followed. We each left a $20 bill on the table and headed outside. As we parted ways, Jordan said, I need to get back to the office. Call me anytime if you need to talk. Let's grab a beer on Friday, and you can let me know what's on your mind. Until then, promise me you won't do anything, okay? I nodded, I promise. Thanks for listening and for the advice. I've got a lot to sort through, I replied, grateful for his support. We went our separate ways. I walked back to my office, doing my best not to get hit by a car on the way. When I got home, I followed Jordan's advice and pretended everything was normal. I kissed my wife, talked with my kids, and we had dinner together. Karen acted like her usual self, and we spent the evening the way we always did, helping the kids with their homework, playing in the yard, and then winding down for bed. Everything seemed perfectly fine. Later, after the kids were tucked into their rooms, I found myself watching Karen, recalling all the things I loved about her, her smile, her figure, the way she moved. I still loved her deeply. From the moment we met, I knew she was the one I wanted to share my life with, the mother of my children. So what happened? I wondered. How did we get here? From the outside, no one would suspect anything was wrong. We looked and behaved like a normal, loving family. We held hands, kissed, and our kids came to us for everything. We were a close-knit team. As I walked around the house, I admired all the projects Karen had completed. She was amazing at home decor and renovations, constantly improving our home. She managed everything from painting to building custom furniture and even renovating bathrooms, with me often helping out. How did she find the time for an affair? I thought bitterly. I barely have time to use the bathroom some days. My wife was a master of hiding things, but this is how I discovered she was seeing someone else. I was at work, meeting with clients at the Hilton Hotel. Needing a break, I stepped outside for some fresh air. As I was heading back in, a taxi pulled up, and out stepped a well-dressed man, followed by a woman who looked a lot like Karen. I was about 100 feet behind them as they walked into the hotel. He took her hand, and they headed toward the elevator. I hurried, nearly catching up, but the elevator doors closed just before I got there. Right before they shut, I saw him put his arm around her waist, and she leaned in to kiss him. It was Karen. My world fell apart. I stood there, stunned, for 10 minutes, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My chest tightened and I thought I might be having a heart attack. I sat down until someone from our meeting passed by and asked if I was coming back in. I returned to the meeting, but I didn't hear a word. Luckily, meeting minutes were recorded, so I didn't mess up the contract. After the meeting, I rushed home, expecting to find Karen packing up to leave, but she was there, busy with the kids and making dinner, greeting me like she always did. That was a few weeks ago, and ever since I've been haunted by thoughts of Karen, our marriage, and our children. How could I have been so blind? I was mentally exhausted. That's when I knew I needed a plan, and I turned to Jordan for help. When Mark came to me, I knew his life was about to change. I understood he'd have to take action, even with my warnings about the impact divorce would have on him and the kids. But the key is to prioritize what matters most and focus on that first. For Mark, his kids were the priority, so he chose to endure Karen's double life. I hired my regular investigator to look into Karen's activities. I wanted to know more before I told Mark, because the full truth could destroy him. They say time heals all wounds and wounds all heals. I'm not sure if that's true, but I swallowed my pride and acted as if I knew nothing. It's strange, if I hadn't seen Karen getting into that elevator, I might never have known. Outwardly, Karen remains the same, a caring mother, organized, hard-working, and still deeply involved with our children. She's still the woman I married a decade ago, but at the same time she feels like a stranger. I'm torn on what to do. Should I confront her and tell her to leave? Should we try couples therapy? What if she wants to end things? And what about the kids? If Karen is in love with this man and wants to leave us for him, I feel completely lost. That's where Jordan comes in. He's my go-to for help in navigating this mess. I hired my investigator, Wolfie, to take on the case. Her real name is Hannah Wolfenstein, but everyone calls her Wolfie. She's a former NYPD detective who retired in her early 30s due to a knee injury. She's tall, blonde, slim, and very attractive, making her excellent at blending in. Her technical skills are top-notch, and she rarely disappoints, though her services are costly. But as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. I called Wolfie to my office, and when she arrived, I couldn't help but feel a strong attraction to her. She has that effect on men. Her knee has mostly healed, so she moves without any noticeable issues. After I got her a cup of coffee, we got down to business. "Gordo, what's the job?" she asked, calling me Gordo as usual. "It's a case of a cheating wife. My best friend's wife," I said, handing her a folder filled with all the information we had on Karen, including her work details, addresses, phone numbers, car info, and a brief bio. I handled the legal basics, but Wolfie's specialty is the more invasive investigations, like looking into financial matters. I explained. Her husband spotted her at the downtown Hilton with a guy who didn't look like just a friend. I need to know what she's doing, who she's with, and for how long. This information will help him decide on a possible divorce and ensure he has an advantage in any custody battle. Wolfie nodded, taking notes. I was confident she would uncover whatever Karen was hiding. She then said, "You know, I don't work for free. I need my usual upfront fee and hourly rate. I'll need at least 3 hours to draft a plan and do an electronic search. I'll get back to you in 2 days with a detailed estimate. Is that okay for you and your client?" "That's fine. He's patient, but wants information before making any moves." "We'll talk in 2 days." Wolfie gathered the files, placed them in her bag, and stood up. I worried my attraction had been obvious, and she might have noticed. As she reached the door, she paused and turned slightly. "Remember, you still owe me dinner," she said. "How could I?" "Forget," I replied. She glanced down and smirked. "I can't stand women who think they can cheat on their unsuspecting husbands and get away with it. I've seen too many of these entitled women betray the men who work hard to provide for them. My client is a devoted family man who was stunned when he accidentally saw his wife holding hands and kissing another man in an elevator at a downtown hotel. According to Gordo, he's not ready to kick her out yet, but wants to know the truth and explore his options. I've seen this situation before. From what Jordan said, the client wants to keep his family intact if possible, but everyone has their breaking point. I've witnessed calm, composed men lose control and make regrettable decisions. Now I need to dig into who Karen Francis really is. I suspect this isn't her first time either. She's gotten sloppy at hiding her infidelity, or this was her first mistake. I'm not sure yet, but I will find out. I'll send Gordo my estimate, and once he approves, I'll get to work. Jordan called me to inform me that his investigator had completed the report. I desperately hoped there was an innocent explanation for what I'd seen. When I arrived at Jordan's office, his serious expression told me otherwise. Mark, Jordan began. Wolfie found a lot of information. I'll let her explain. But your suspicions were right. Karen is seeing another man. I turned to the investigator, feeling dread sink in. Mr. Francis. Wolfie began. I started looking into your wife as soon as Jordan briefed me. Unfortunately, I found that Karen has been involved with another man for quite some time. I felt sick, rushed to the bathroom, and vomited. When I returned, Jordan and Hannah were there, helping me regain my balance. After a few deep breaths, I decided to keep going. I figured it was better to get through it quickly, rather than prolong it. Hannah picked up where she left off. We conducted a thorough electronic investigation on your wife, but there's not much about her online. As a web developer, she knows how to manage her digital presence. She only has a Facebook page, and it's very family-focused with photos of you, the kids, and typical family activities. I stared at her, confused. We checked her Facebook friends for any suspicious accounts but found nothing. It's possible, though, that she's using a fake profile on a device you're unaware of. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So we employed some more traditional methods, Hannah continued. We placed a tracker on her car to monitor her movements. In the first week, we tracked her usual spots: work, home, the kids' school, the grocery store. Then we chose specific times and places to follow her closely. My heart sank. Oh my God, I whispered. During the second week, we installed a listening device in her car, which recorded her conversations. That's how we found out she was arranging to meet a man named Thomas Murray. Do you know him? I shook my head. No, she went on. Thomas Murray is a corporate attorney working on a project for the New York State Comptroller's office. He's married to Brittany Murray, and they live here in Albany with their daughter, Allison. Hannah handed me pictures of Thomas, his wife, their daughter, and their house. Do you recognize any of this? I shook my head again. Not really. When I saw Karen, I wasn't paying attention to him. I was focused on her. From the recordings, we learned that Karen had planned to meet Murray at a hotel last Wednesday. We were there and took these pictures of them together. She passed me photos of Karen holding hands with him. Hannah paused to let the information sink in before she continued. After identifying Mr. Murray, we ran a comprehensive background check. We discovered that he and Karen were in a relationship in college. Before you met her, the room began to spin, and Jordan handed me a paper bag, instructing me to breathe into it. It helped a bit. Hannah looked to Jordan for confirmation before she resumed. I looked at her and nodded, taking a sip of water. We checked university records and found that Mr. Murray was a third-year student when Mrs. Francis was a freshman. They dated for 2 years and even lived together for 1 year before breaking up. Shortly after that, you met her, Hannah explained. Were you able to find out why they broke up? I asked. Yes, Mr. Murray went on to law school in North Carolina, where he met his future wife. They married around his graduation, and their child was born about 6 months later, she replied. So he got her pregnant, I concluded. Yes, Hannah confirmed. When did Karen start seeing him again? I asked. We're not completely sure, but we discovered that he has a hidden bank account, likely kept secret from his wife, which he uses to pay for a hotel room nearly every week, Hannah continued. Does Karen have a secret account too? I asked. Hannah hesitated before replying. Yes, she does. It's at a credit union near her office and has about $40,000 in it. I was stunned. How did she get that much money? I manage our taxes, and while we save, it's nothing like this. She's been diverting a portion of her salary into this account, about 25%. She also has a separate credit card and a second phone that she uses to contact Mr. Murray, Hannah explained. Oh my God, my wife is living a double life, I muttered in shock. Hannah glanced at Jordan, who nodded. Then Jordan spoke. Mark, there's more. And it's the hardest part. How could this possibly get worse? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Jordan, looking more downcast than I'd ever seen, said, Go ahead, Wolfie. Tell him. Hannah took a deep breath. Mr. Francis, when dealing with long-term infidelity, I extend my investigation to include family members. Last year, you had your children's DNA tested for safety reasons. We accessed that DNA and compared it to yours and Mrs. Francis's. Karen is their mother, but you are not their biological father. What? That's impossible, I shouted. Jordan stepped in. Mark, I know this is difficult to believe, but we used your DNA from a coffee cup here and ran the tests twice. The realization that the children's father was someone else made my world fall apart once more. I couldn't catch my breath, and the room spun until I had to lie down on the floor. As Hannah explained the DNA results, it felt like my entire reality had shattered. I now had an unfaithful wife and children who weren't biologically mine. It took me some time to absorb it all. Hannah provided me with a detailed written report and a flash drive, along with a copy for Jordan's records in case a divorce became necessary. I asked Hannah, "Were you able to find out who the father of Karen's children is?" "We haven't confirmed it yet, but if you'd like, we can collect DNA from the potential father and compare it to the children's," she offered. I nodded. "Please do." "I suspect it's Thomas Murray." Hannah and Jordan exchanged looks before she said, "We believe he's the biological father." "Okay, do it. I don't care how you get it, just find out." We wrapped things up, and Hannah packed her belongings, handing the folder to Jordan. As she was about to leave, she said, "Mr. Francis, despite everything, it appears Mrs. Francis still cares about you deeply. Before you make any decisions, think carefully. And one last piece of advice, don't do anything that could land you in jail. It won't help you." She gestured for Jordan to join her in the hallway. They spoke softly for a moment, and I noticed her glance at me a few times before she kissed Jordan on the cheek and left. I assumed they were close, perhaps even more than friends. Jordan returned, and we sat in silence for a few minutes before he stood up and said, "Come on, you're coming with me." "I can't believe how much pleasure Tommy brings me. He's so good at it. You might wonder if it's normal to be married and have a lover. For me it is. Many married people love someone else. It's more common than you think. But not everyone ends their marriage because of it. I love Mark deeply, but I'm also in love with Tommy. You may see me as just another cheating wife, but this is my life. Mark doesn't know about Tommy, and Tommy's wife doesn't know about me. We want to keep it that way. We spend one day a week together, and we've been doing this for years. I loved Tommy before we got married, before he married Brittany, and before I married Mark. When Tommy met Brittany in law school and got her pregnant, he did the right thing and married her. That's when we ended our relationship, and then I met Mark. We started dating, I fell in love, and we got married. But when I reconnected with Tommy, our relationship reignited. We still loved each other, but now we had other commitments. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop seeing Tommy. I loved Mark as my husband, but Tommy felt like my true love. Our relationship had to take a backseat to our marriages, so we began meeting once a week. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. Mark was thrilled about becoming a father, but I wasn't sure if the baby was his or Tommy's. At the time, it didn't matter. My pregnancy only intensified my desires, and I couldn't get enough of either Mark or Tommy. After Keith was born, Tommy and I took a break from our affair. Mark naturally embraced fatherhood and became an incredible dad. He worked all day and still came home eager to help so I could rest. When Keith was about a year old, I became pregnant with Andrea. Those 3 years were tough but wonderful. Mark was my hero, making our family life feel complete. My time with Tommy is the escape I need. He makes me feel alive and fulfills something that Mark, despite being an amazing husband and father, can't provide. It's not that Mark isn't enough, it's just that with Tommy, I get a thrill I can't find in my everyday life with Mark. I know I'm playing with fire, but I'm careful. Mark is so busy with work and the kids that he doesn't suspect a thing. I keep everything normal at home, giving him no reason to doubt me. I love Mark and don't want to hurt him, but I can't let go of Tommy. He's my secret, my escape, and I need that. I asked Jordan to drive me home in my car, and he took a taxi back to his office. Once inside the house, I wandered around, looking at everything as if seeing it for the first time. I walked into Keith and Andrea's rooms, remembering all the bedtime stories, the times I took care of them when they were sick, changed their diapers, and carried them around the house. They are my children, they bear my last name, and my name is on their birth certificates. Karen's deception weighed heavily on my mind. How could she lie to me for so long? If she never wanted children with me, why didn't she just say so? Why did we get married at all? We had painted and redecorated the kids' rooms countless times, first when they were infants, then later when they began school, adding desks, repainting, and letting them pick out furniture. In the family room, I stared at the walls filled with framed pictures of us together, memories captured during holidays and formal family photos taken at Christmas. chronicling our growth as a family. Why did she have to destroy everything? I couldn't stop asking myself why she turned our marriage into a sham and robbed me of what mattered most. Do I hate her now? I used to love her deeply, but now all I feel is resentment. Why was she so heartless? I don't even know my next steps. After meeting Tommy, I returned home just before Mark came back. I always showered after seeing Tommy, and I used the Find My app to keep tabs on Mark, especially when he was out with the kids. I always worried about them. With Tommy, it's mostly about the physical connection. I love Mark, and deep down, I know Tommy loves Brittany. Having a baby wasn't part of Tommy's plan, but he accepted it and married Brittany. She's a good person, and their relationship is solid. Tommy and I share a similar need for passion, something we often lack time for at home. Don't get me wrong, Mark is a great lover who knows how to satisfy me, but our intimate life is often influenced by the demands of family. We usually connect a couple of times a week, mostly on weekends, and Mark always ensures I'm pleased. So why do I have Tommy? The answer is simple: I want him. I crave the attention Tommy gives me. We were a couple before Mark and Brittany. I was in love with Tommy, and I still am, but life didn't unfold the way we planned. Tommy married Brittany when she got pregnant, so I moved on with Mark. Mark is an amazing man, sweet, loyal, hard-working, and a fantastic father. He would do anything for me. But why isn't he enough? Because I still want Tommy. When Tommy and I ended things, it wasn't because I stopped loving him or didn't want a life with him. It was due to circumstances. Mark and Tommy fulfill different needs. Mark gives me love, respect, and stability. He's the perfect husband and a devoted father, thoughtful and attentive. We share a deep connection. But I also have a profound bond with Tommy. He awakens a side of me that Mark doesn't, sometimes intense and wild, other times slow and tender. Our moments together are ours alone, away from the strains of family and work. Afterward, we clean up, dress, and go back to our separate lives. Before parting with Tommy, I always check my phone to track Mark's location, ensuring we avoid any awkward encounters. This routine has worked smoothly for years, and I have no intention of changing it. It's been nearly 2 weeks since Jordan and Hannah exposed what Karen had been hiding throughout our marriage. I feel utterly foolish. I was so used to believing that Karen loved me. We had built a life, a home, and a family, or so I thought. In an instant, all my hopes and dreams were shattered, and I realized my entire marriage was a lie. Now I'm lost, unsure of how to move forward. How do I navigate this? When I look at Karen, I still see the woman I married: kind, charming, beautiful, talented, hardworking, and an incredible mother. But our children aren't truly ours, they are hers and Thomas Murray's. I am childless, feeling utterly betrayed, and there's no one I can confide in. 3 days ago, I met with Jordan over drinks, and he suggested I see a psychologist. He even set up an appointment for me, so we'll see if that helps. Over the last couple of weeks, I've noticed Mark has been unusually distracted. I often have to repeat myself several times before he listens or understands, and he barely pays attention to the kids. Andrea often has to physically pull his hand to get his focus. He apologizes for not listening, but moments later he's lost in his own thoughts again. He seems to be spending much more time at work, missing school meetings we were supposed to attend together, so I ended up going by myself. He's been waking up very early to go for a run. What used to be a 45-minute jog has now extended to an hour and a half before he returns to shower. He eats very little at lunch and has been minimizing interactions with me and the kids. Mark met with his psychologist, Dr. Marilyn Snow, a kind woman in her 60s with a soothing and calm presence. I shared my situation with her, explaining how it had impacted me. She asked if I had any plans for the future, what steps I intended to take, whether I might run into Karen, consider divorce, or think about forgiveness. I told her I was still trying to devise a plan. I mentioned my friend and lawyer, Jordan, had advised me not to make any moves until I was completely sure of my decision. Dr. Snow agreed that this was a sensible short-term approach, but asked what my long-term goals were. I didn't have an answer. If Karen's infidelity had been brief, I might have considered forgiving her, but learning that she never stopped seeing her real lover and that he was the father of her children was a crushing revelation. How could I ever trust her again? Accepting things as they were would mean living with the knowledge that I was her second choice. that I had raised someone else's children and that she had deceived me throughout our life together. If Murray and his wife divorced, would Karen leave to be with him? How could I find happiness again knowing all this? It had been more than a month since I last saw Mark, and today he wanted to meet at my office to discuss his tentative plan for handling the situation with Karen. I greeted him at the door, and we moved straight to the meeting room. Mark took off his jacket, and I handed him a bottle of water, which he opened and took a sip from. "So what do you want to discuss today?" Jordan Mark asked, his voice strained with unresolved emotions. "I've been struggling since Hannah revealed everything about Karen's true actions. I saw the psychologist you recommended, and she helped me see things differently. I've been reflecting on this for a while and think I've made some decisions. Okay, how can I help?" I asked, sensing the gravity of his words. Mark began to outline his plan. It was simple but detailed, with certain issues needing close attention. My job was to start preparing the legal documents and be ready to file them. Mark had already spoken with his banker and had a long discussion with his employer. So everything now depended on timing and these crucial details. "I'll need Wolfie's help to carry out the plan," Mark added. 2 weeks later, I found myself in Dubai, overwhelmed by the intense heat following a long trip train from Albany to New York, subway to JFK, then an 18-hour flight with Air France, including a 4-hour layover in Paris. I finally arrived in the United Arab Emirates, specifically Dubai, my temporary new home. I secured a job with a British engineering firm working on a significant project in the city. In our line of work, engineers are in high demand worldwide, and sometimes relocating for a specific project is beneficial. This was one of those times. The job will be challenging, but the rewards are worthwhile. My base salary is around $25,000 per month with excellent benefits and no income tax in the UAE. I don't plan to stay longer than 2 years, as the culture here doesn't feel like a long-term fit for me, though that might change. For now, my primary goal is to work hard and save as much money as possible. Getting used to the weather will be a challenge, especially after living in central New York. My job comes with a sleek apartment in a modern high-rise underground parking and a fast black Mercedes E450, quite the upgrade from my old Subaru Outback back in Albany. The company also provided me with an assistant, Amanda, a well-educated British woman in her late 20s who met me at the airport and drove me to my new place. Amanda's deep knowledge of the UAE, its culture and language will be extremely useful. I brought along just my old leather briefcase and a single suitcase, deciding to buy anything else I might need once settled. During the drive, Amanda kept talking non-stop about the UAE, highlighting both its positives and drawbacks, making me realize that this job would be tough but possibly rewarding. Leaving Albany, I knew there would be chaos, but that was no longer my concern. Karen and her lover could handle it. I felt bad for the kids, but I knew no judge would allow me to take them away from their mother. My meeting with Mark went on for a couple of hours. He arrived with notes and a folder of documents, asking me to coordinate a few tasks for him. This marked the end of the road for Karen Francis and Thomas Murray. Hannah had discovered where Karen and Murray met each week, sometimes at a small hotel near a FedEx office, other times at a friend's apartment to cut costs. Mark informed me that he planned to pack his things early in the morning, head to the train station, and leave the country without disclosing his final destination, though he had given me his email. After dropping the kids at school and waiting for Karen to leave for work, he intended to go home, grab his bag, and call a cab. This is where Wolfie came into play. She had prepared a package of documents for Karen to be delivered while they were in the hotel room, likely during their affair. Wolfie's plan was to knock on the door, pretending to be police, and ask them to open up. Once inside, she would request Karen's ID, take a photo, and hand over a package containing a formal summons statement. Enclosed were divorce papers, DNA test results proving Mark was not the father of the children. Murray was, along with transcripts of phone calls between Karen and Murray and incriminating photos. My next step was to wait for Wolfie's call confirming the package was delivered, then reach out to Brittany Murray to inform her of the situation. Mark had thought about suing Murray to recover the expenses of raising Keith and Andrea, but decided against it, not wanting to hurt Brittany and her daughter because of Murray's behavior. Yesterday, Mark called to tell me that today was D-Day, the day he would start his new life. I immediately contacted Wolfie, who came to my office first thing in the morning to finalize her plan and pick up the paperwork. Wolfie was in high spirits when she arrived, and I asked her what had her so excited. She grinned and said this woman is finally facing the consequences of betraying a man who devoted his life to her and to what he believed were his kids. She deserves every bit of this. We sat at the conference table, packed everything into large envelopes, and labeled them. After some coffee and conversation, Wolfie left to check out Karen's workplace. Shortly after noon, she called to let me know Karen was on her way. But all that was left for me was to be ready to contact Brittany Murray. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and spotted Tommy's SUV parked discreetly at the edge. I parked my car, got out, and we met at the side entrance of the hotel. He already had the room key. We kissed and held hands as we entered, taking the elevator up. Once inside the room, we started undressing, pulling back the blanket on the bed. I needed him immediately. Mark had barely spoken to me in the past few weeks, and I was yearning for Tommy. The sensation of his hands on my skin was electrifying. Near the bed, he pulled me close, kissing my neck and shoulders, his hands firmly grasping me. We moved to the bed as Tommy began kissing down my chest and stomach. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from the door, and a voice called out, "Mrs. Karen Francis, I know you're in there. Open the door." We froze, staring at each other and then at the door. "What the hell?" I whispered. "Mrs. Francis, open the door, or hotel security will," the voice continued. Tommy hurried to gather his clothes while I grabbed whatever I could and started dressing. The knocking persisted. "We're opening the door now," the voice warned again. Wait, I'm opening it," I called out. Tommy cracked the door open, leaving the chain latched. "Mr. Murray, open the door fully, or we will," the voice demanded. Tommy glanced at me, saw that I was almost dressed, and unlatched the chain, opening the door wide. A woman with a badge stepped in and looked directly at me. "Are you Mrs. Karen Francis?" she asked. I nodded. "I need a verbal yes or no, please." "Oh yes," I replied nervously. She approached and requested my ID. I found my bag and handed her my driver's license, which she photographed with her phone before giving it back. She then handed me a large envelope. "You've been served with a subpoena," she said, then turned to Tommy. "Mr. Thomas Murray, you've been served with a subpoena," she repeated, handing him another envelope. She quickly took a picture of us and left. "What the hell was that?" Tommy asked, bewildered. I looked at the envelope, realizing that my world had just crumbled. Mark had found out about Tommy? His silence over the past weeks suddenly made sense. The room began to spin, and I nearly fainted. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the bed, and Tommy was sitting in a chair, looking at his phone. I got up, rushed to the bathroom, and vomited. Afterward, I gathered my belongings. "I have to go home," I said, avoiding Tommy's eyes. Somehow I made it back home without getting into an accident. Once inside, I called out, Mark, where are you?" My voice shook with panic. I searched every room, but he was gone. Returning to the kitchen, I noticed a white envelope on the counter with my name on it. Inside was a single piece of paper and Mark's wedding ring. Dread filled me as I unfolded the note. "Karen, by now you know I've discovered your long-term affair with Thomas Murray. I know you were seeing him even before we got married. If you haven't looked at the documents you were served, you should. You'll see I know that I'm not Keith and Andrea's father. Murray is. What hurts the most isn't that I'm not the father of the children I loved and raised. It's your deception that has destroyed everything, and I will never forgive you. As for our future paths, I've left. I took very little, leaving the house and everything else for you to decide. Jordan has additional paperwork for you. I forfeited my claim to the house and our possessions. You may wonder how I found out about you and Murray. It was pure chance. I was at the same hotel where you two meet, and during a break I saw you and him entering an elevator. You kissed him. The look on your face was the same one you used to give me when I believed you loved me. How wrong I was. I will never contact you again so you can move on with your life, and I can move on with mine. I am sorry that Keith and Andrea will suffer the most from this. Perhaps they can connect with their real father, and he will be good to them. I will truly miss them. Goodbye, Mark." I let the letter fall from my hands and slumped onto the living room sofa. I dialed Mark's number, but it was disconnected. I called his office, and the receptionist told me Mark had left the company with no forwarding information. But damn it, I called his mother, but she knew nothing. Finally, I opened the envelope containing the documents and reviewed them. Everything was there, every foolish mistake I had made over the past decade. including DNA test results and incriminating photos. I had never tested the children's DNA, but deep down I knew they were Tommy's. As they grew older, their resemblance to him became undeniable. What had I done? Jordan emailed me an update on how Mark found out about Karen's affair. It was a difficult revelation, but I knew my relationship with her was over. I could never trust that she had truly loved me. I was always her second choice. Discovering that Murray was the father of the kids confirmed everything. I should have walked away without looking back. I've been in the UAE for a month now and have mostly adjusted. I called my parents to explain what had happened, and although they were deeply saddened, they understood that I couldn't tolerate Karen's betrayal. I'm still young, and they believe I will eventually find someone new to share my life with. The situation with Thomas Murray and his wife, Brittany, was tense. She called me and later visited my office, where I revealed everything about her husband's long-standing affair with Karen. To my knowledge, she hasn't yet decided whether to kick him out. Karen showed up demanding to know where Mark was, but I genuinely didn't know, so I didn't have to lie. I had her sign the divorce papers, along with a specific request from Mark to have his name removed from Keith and Andrea's birth certificates, replacing it with Thomas Murray's. After some back and forth with the judge and presenting the DNA evidence, the court granted Mark's request, ensuring there would be no legal complications regarding responsibility for the children. Life in the UAE is going well so far, but being a single parent is harder than I imagined. I have to manage everything for the kids and the house on my own now, without Mark to share the load. My dad comes by occasionally to handle minor repairs that Mark used to take care of. He stops by, does the work, chats briefly with the kids if they're around, and then leaves, barely saying a word to me. My parents found out why Mark left. They knew I had loved Tommy before Mark, but they assumed it ended when Tommy married Brittany. They never knew I'd been seeing him the whole. Tommy's also on thin ice. I haven't seen him since that disastrous day at the hotel, and I'm not even sure if introducing him to the kids is a good idea. The house and most of our savings are mine, but I still need to work to cover expenses. The court ruled that Mark isn't financially responsible for the kids since they aren't his, and I had kept that fact hidden from him. Regarding my finances, the money in the bank is mine to use freely, plus I still have my not-so-secret account that Mark was aware of. I really messed things up. What do I do now? 6 months later, life moved on. I miss Karen and the kids, but every thought of her fills me with anger at both her and myself for wrecking our marriage, so I stay busy to keep her off my mind. My social life has gradually picked up again. I've met a lot of people at work, many here for different reasons: money, experiencing a new culture, or recovering from personal issues. I'm here for all of those reasons. Last month, I took a motorcycle trip through the desert to an oasis. I bought a used BMW F800 GS and joined a local motorcycle club for weekend rides. Amanda had mentioned wanting to try something like that, so I invited her along. It was her first time on a motorcycle and my first time. With a passenger, we had a great time. The trip organizer mistakenly thought we were a couple, so when we arrived, there was only one room available with a single bed, and the hotel was fully booked. We had to share. It was awkward at first, but we managed. I offered to sleep on the floor, but she insisted we share the bed. In the morning, I woke up holding her waist. It wasn't intentional, but it happened. The awkward part was that I was very excited, and it wouldn't go away. Amanda was still asleep, but she started moving, and her body brushed against me. I quickly got out of bed and went to the bathroom before it got more uncomfortable. When I came out, she was getting dressed without a bra, and her movements caught my attention. She noticed and teased, never seen a half-unclothed woman before. She then pulled off her t-shirt and headed to the bathroom. I heard the water running, followed by, "Are you coming or not?" That was the start. Everything changed from that moment. Mark and I returned to London to visit my parents, who had met him last Christmas when we were here for the holidays. My father, a banker, and my mother, a teacher, are well off and nearing retirement. They were eager to meet the American I was bringing home. My dad wanted to spend time with Mark, so they went to the local pub for a beer and a chat. A couple of hours later, they came back, and my dad was smiling, clearly feeling more at ease with Mark. I'm sure he shared his impressions with my mum. Now it's summer, and we're back with big news. Mark and I are moving to the UK. It's his first time living here, and he's secured a new job on a major construction project in the Cotswolds. The pay is excellent, and our plan is to rent a house first, then consider buying one in a few years. We are looking for a house with at least 3 bedrooms, and I'd prefer to have 2 bathrooms so we don't have to share with guests. I know that's a bit selfish. The other major news is that I'm pregnant, due in November, so we need to move, settle down, handle medical stuff, and, oh yeah, get married. Mark proposed, and I said yes. I've been searching for Mark online nearly every day since he left. I still have the letter he left in the kitchen. The kids were heartbroken when the father they knew disappeared without a word. But what could he have said? Sorry kids, I'm not really your dad, but your mum's a liar, so I'm leaving. That wouldn't have gone over well. I know I created this mess. I've started seeing a therapist every week and plan to continue as long as my insurance covers it. She says I was kidding myself, thinking I could have both men without any consequences, and that I set Mark up to fail as a husband and father, leading to his departure. She suggested I apologize to Mark and the kids. It would be great if I could find him. I can't afford a private investigator, so I sometimes ask his family for help, but Mark's father just tells me to go to hell, and his mother won't talk to me. We moved to a smaller, more affordable house, although the kids aren't happy about it. I'm driving Mark's old Subaru, it's still dependable. I've tried hard to forget the time when I thought I was the happiest person alive. Everything changed the day my ex-wife had that random encounter with her lover at the hotel. Without that, I might never have known the truth, but once I found out, I had to take action. 10 years of lies were too much. How can someone lie every day, claim they love you while cheating, and take your love only to give it to someone else? How do you deceive your own children? I'm not perfect, and some might criticize how I handled Karen's betrayal, but it was the only way I could stay true to myself. My deepest regret is for the kids. Keith and Andrea, I hope they get to know their real father and that he loves them like I did. Karen destroyed my love, she poisoned it. I couldn't bear to look at Keith and Andrea, knowing they were born out of deceit. They deserve better. I will do my best to be a good father to my child. Mark's actions were drastic, and I thought he might regret leaving the children, even though they weren't his biologically. He was there for their births, raised them, changed their diapers, fed them, and saw their first words and steps. He was their dad. But I saw a friend deeply wounded by the infidelity of the woman who vowed to love him. Karen's betrayal couldn't have been worse unless she had physically harmed him. I understand why Mark left, and as his friend and lawyer I supported his decision. Karen still calls, asking where he is or begging him to come back. I forwarded some messages until Mark told me to stop, so I did. Every few months, I get a short email from Mark with updates on his life. I know he's leaving the UAE for the UK and that he has a new partner named Amanda. I promised not to tell Karen. I'm happy for Mark. He's even set up an education fund for Keith and Andrea for when they go to college, and I'll make sure they receive it. As for me, I got married to Wolfie, though my family knows her as Hannah. She's pregnant, and we're expecting our baby in December. We've decided to drop the nickname before our child grows up and learns what it means.